Hey, hi, welcome to another episode of the Leadership Enigma. I have another wonderful guest who's bopping to the music. That's the second time in one day that's happened. Listen, you know that we are passionate about leadership. We are passionate about human-centered leadership. We're passionate about leadership and leaders being able to bring out trust, empowerment, autonomy. But how about freedom? What does freedom at work actually mean? Is that some kind of utopian destiny that's impossible? I don't know. But once again, listen, you've heard me say this once, you'll hear me say it again. I need someone wiser than me. So luckily, I have got the wonderful Traci Fenton with me who's going to help us. She is the author of Freedom at Work. She is the CEO of WorldBlu. She is part of the Thinkers 50. She's part of the Marshall Gold. Oh, there are so many things that I need to talk to you about, Traci. Come back to me after this break. Trust me, you don't want to miss this episode.
You're listening to The Leadership Enigma, powered by Transform Performance International, a podcast for the insatiably curious to explore the power of human-centered leadership to create real momentum for positive and sustainable change. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or corporate executive, each week we speak to global experts, academics, rising stars, ambitious upstarts, and disruptors as we discover that success leaves clues. Now, here's your host, Adam Pacifico.
Well, there you have it. Success leaves clues. So Traci Fenton, there is no pressure on you whatsoever, but it's a huge warm welcome to the Leadership Enigma. I can't even say the podcast name now. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm so happy to be here, Adam. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, I gave a little bit of an introduction, but Traci, you were recommended to me very highly by the wonderful Gary Ridge, who we know, current CEO of WD-40. And he said, you've got to speak to Traci Fenton. And then we connected a few weeks ago. We had a great conversation, and we just had to make this happen. And I spoke about so many things, but you help the listeners understand. You have an incredibly rich background. Just tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment. What makes up Traci Fenton in the world?
Oh, absolutely. Well, what I care about, Adam, is helping over 1 billion people live, lead, and work in freedom rather than fear. And I think we've never lived in a time where there's been more fear than there is now. So how can we help people individually, collectively, and in our workplaces lead with freedom instead? And I started this work 25 years ago when I started my company, WorldBlu. And we've had the great privilege and honor of certifying the most freedom-centered companies in the world. In fact, next spring, we'll be announcing our 17th annual list of freedom-centered companies. And my new book, Freedom at Work, highlights 50 of those companies and 100 best practices that are very unconventional and different ways of approaching how we lead with freedom rather than fear. So it's a great joy to do this work. We've worked with companies and individuals in over 100 countries worldwide. And our vision, like I said, is to see 1 billion people at least living, leading, and working in freedom.
Wow. Now that's a hell of a vision, isn't it, in relation to having 1 billion people in your sight? Traci, I'm always looking for evidence. It's the detective, it's the lawyer in me. And I'm looking for clues in relation to what makes you so passionate about what it is that you do. And so I was reading up a little bit about you. So there's the detective in me. And I notice very much so your very strong purpose, personal purpose, not organizational. Traci Fenton has a personal purpose and a vision, which you've outlined. Tell me where this focus on freedom and fear comes from. Because this world is constantly changing, and you're right, there are so many things wrong with the world, but you set this company up 20 plus years ago. So help me understand that focus on freedom and fear.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Adam, for that question. Well, from a very young age, I was sort of a weird kid in the fact that I really cared about helping people live their full potential. I have this memory of being in 4th grade over here, which was 10 years old. And when all my friends at recess would go play Foursquare, I would take one-on-one individual appointments by the back fence, coaching fellow 10-year-olds on, life and how to live their fullest potential. And I was super weird, but that's what I did. And So all of this evolved and evolved, and I always knew that that was I couldn't necessarily articulate it, but from a young age, I knew my purpose was about helping people to, express their unlimited potential. And so all of this started to really take shape my senior year of college. And I was asked to be the director of our student affairs conference. And I said to the student team, which were all my friends, hey, let's do a conference that's going to be very consciousness raising and outside the box thinking and really move people forward. And they went out and did a bunch of research, came back to me a few months later and said, Traci, we think we should actually do the conference on democracy. And to me, democracy meant voting and old white guys in politics in Washington, D.C.
It does for many people, right?
I was like, this is the most boring topic ever. What are you guys talking about? And so I kind of had a bad leadership moment and was like, no, no. And we started talking about it. And they're like, actually, Traci, you need to understand democracy isn't politics. It's a way that we give power to people so they can be free. And all of a sudden, something just resonated with me in the core of my being. And I was like, wait a second. If I care about people living their fullest potential, that can only happen in environments of freedom, not fear. Well, what's that framework that gets us to freedom? I believe it's organizational democracy, which is what this evolved into. And so what I do and my team does, Adam, what we're so passionate about is using the vehicle of business to help people be better leaders and to design their companies, not in an authoritarian hierarchical way, which hierarchical leadership is out, but in a much more power to the people, democratic, I don't mean politics, but a democratic leadership style that creates amazing results. And so that's when this really clicked for me over the years. Is it's about freedom. It's not about fear and control.
Oh, I have so many questions. I really do. I'm intrigued, you see, because there's a bit of nature and nurture question coming out now, because at 10 years old, you said you were the quirky kid, but actually you were tapping into your own personal power. And then you had almost, dare I call it, an epiphany where you suddenly thought this is at the heart of the purpose-driven Traci. How comes you were so receptive and that was you so early? Because was it the environment? Did mom and dad come to play in it? How come? What was going on in these early years, Traci?
Well, I had great parents. My parents were teachers. I grew up in Iowa, and I had a very spiritual upbringing. I was raised spiritually and in a religion, dare I say, that was very much about that you have unlimited potential, that each one of us is made to be our best self. I was not raised with doctrine that you're a sinner. I was raised with the idea that you're, the unlimited idea of God, if I can say God on the program.
You can.
That ethos that each one of us has infinite value, that each one of us has unlimited potential, that was just infused in me, and from a young age, and then reinforced. And I think that's why I believe it so strongly, Adam, is I believe each one of us has infinite worth. You and I talked pre-show how important it is to know our worth. I don't think you can really stand for freedom and even believe in democracy if you don't really truly believe in the worth and value inherent in every single person. So that environment definitely shaped me. I was very blessed to have a golden childhood, and it doesn't mean life's perfect, doesn't mean I haven't had challenges along the way, but that incredible environment that was so supportive definitely helped me move forward with this. Yeah.
Well, in many ways, we're the sum of the parts, aren't we? So you talked about your mom and dad, you talked about the home life, you talked about religion. It's funny, isn't it, how some people hesitate, even when they make mention of it. But actually, that's who we are. That's our education, our experience, our wisdom, and all of those critical ingredients. You mentioned one thing I want to come back to, because this really resonates. And you talked about the power of the organization. Now, whether that's small, medium, or large, and the people who lead and the people who work within that organization, organizations are a real force for good, aren't they? Almost above and beyond, dare I say, politics and governments. Tell me about your thinking now in relation to the power and responsibility and accountability for organizations across the world.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we're in our organizations 8 or more hours a day. And so organizations and leaders have a tremendous, I believe, moral responsibility. Number one, to create the conditions that helps everyone be their best leadership self.
Right.
And number two, make sure as businesses, we are spreading freedom and democracy through business. In the past, Adam, people learned how to be people of character in the home or in their churches or synagogues or temples. And people don't necessarily, the homes are breaking down, unfortunately. People aren't so much, involved with organized religion. There's pros and cons to that. But where do you learn anymore how to be a good person? And I think a lot of that is actually resting on business leaders. I'll never forget a company that we worked with many years ago. It's a very well-known brand. And the first time years ago that I went to the company and I walked around, they had their core values up everywhere. And so many of their employees I talked with said, Traci, I'm a better person now because I've learned how to be a better person in my workplace. And that, Adam, ripples out to affect the world. And this isn't just a nice idea. There's been some great research done by Gretchen Spreitzer at the University of Michigan, and she found that when companies operate democratically, giving power to their people, helping people develop a sense of voice, a sense of collaboration skills, of decision-making skills, all of that, that it does, in fact, ripple out to impact the level of peace, economic prosperity, and civic engagement. So I believe companies have a huge responsibility. And I think we've seen a lot of, in my opinion, way too much dictatorship in the workplaces and the companies, and we need to see more democracy.
So this is incredibly relevant to anyone who's listening, isn't it? This isn't just about monolithic organizations making a shift. I hear from many leaders now about wanting to be a force for good, wanting to serve the communities within which they operate. And in order to be decent and give something back to humanity above and beyond a product or a service. But how relevant as well is this to people who might be listening who are thinking, I'm just starting off in my career. There's just a couple of us with a great idea, or we're a small business, or we're a medium business. Still relevant, yes?
Absolutely. In fact, we worked with small to Fortune 500s, but we work mostly with small businesses and entrepreneurs. And of course, I've been an entrepreneur and, myself. And so when we talk with entrepreneurs, small solopreneurs just getting going,
Yep.
most important thing is it starts with your mindset as a leader. And I talk about this in the book, that everything, of all the great Gary Ridge's WD-40 WorldBlu certified Freedom Center company, all these great companies we've worked with, the number one place, Adam, that separates these leaders from normal leadership is the mindset. And the mindset is, I want to lead myself and others from that place of freedom rather than fear.
Now,
and yeah, go ahead.
No. Again, you see, you're kind of spiking my interest in my questions here, but I don't want to jump straight into it. When we talk about mindset, and I'm going to ask you, because I know you break it down into mindset, freedom-centered leadership, and freedom-centered design. Are we talking a lot about culture?
Well, culture is the outgrowth of that.
Right.
Culture is the outgrowth, I believe, of mindset leadership and the design of the systems and processes of the organization. That's going to give you culture. And so often people want to shoot right to culture. That's what I wanted to do early in my career. I was like, okay, we're going to create a great culture. And I didn't understand, no, wait a second. It actually starts with mindset. I mean, think about the culture of your home, right? It's the outgrowth of your mindset, of how you feel about yourself, your spouse, your partner, your kids. That's going to create the culture in your family. It's the same thing in a home or in a company. So it all starts with mindset, leadership, design. That is what I believe gives you culture. And there's lots of smaller facets in all that, but those are the big buckets that get us there.
And mindset is that solid foundation, isn't it? Because in the, dare I say, the one book that I helped write, we had a simple premise that as you believe, so you behave, and as you behave, so you perform. So what is that belief system, or what is that mindset? So am I right in thinking, Traci, that that's your really solid bedrock or foundation?
Absolutely. And you use it all the time. I mean, I literally, right before this podcast, was just on a call with one of our CEOs in Hungary, and she had some very exciting news come through. and needed coaching. And I got on with her and I took her through our 5-step power question practice that I talk about in mindset to handle the fear. And it was so cool to watch her go from like absolutely terrified as an entrepreneur running a company of about 30 people to literally her whole body shifted. She opened up, she was smiling as we handled that fear in her mindset and got her to the other side where she was like, wait a second, huge opportunity. I can do this. I can do this. And that's what it's about on a moment by moment basis, Adam, is handling that fear and then letting our behaviors and decisions come from that place of freedom instead.
So let me stay on mindset before I ask you something about freedom-centered leadership. So with the mindset, as people are listening to this, get them started, Traci. How can a leader now listening to this start to consider this mindset, which is a very successful bedrock? Because I know that there's been huge impact for companies that are certified by you who really embrace this. There's real return on investment here. I'm going to come on to that.
Yeah.
But help a leader understand, how do they start this process? How should they get their mind thinking about mindset in this aspect of freedom at work?
Well, most of the time, sometimes our egos come in and we don't realize how much we make decisions from fear, right? I was just coaching another CEO the other day and he goes, Traci, when you first started talking with me about this, I've been coaching him for a year and he's like, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of anything. And I was like, well, let's see about that. And he just said to me last week, I finally realized how much fear I have. So the average person thinks 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those thoughts are the same thoughts we had before. And 95% of those thoughts the day before, 95% of those thoughts are negative and fear-based. Wow. So we have way more fear than we realize, from small fears to big fears. Small, what am I going to eat? Should I eat that? Or is it going to, hurt me? Or should I drink that? Or my time? I wake up in the morning, so many people wake up in the morning terrified, right? My to-do list. So anyway, fears can be small to big. So where do we start, to your question? All right. So I give a 5-step process for how to recognize the fear and overcome it.
Okay.
Those 5 questions, I'm just going to go through them. So listeners, if you want to think about a challenge you're facing, these 5 questions, I'm going to say it fast, but really got to take it slow.
I'll put them in the show notes as well, Traci.
Perfect. The first question is, what are you afraid of? So this CEO I was literally just coaching moments before, what was she afraid of with this huge opportunity coming to her? She was afraid that she wasn't going to be able to really represent the idea very well. Okay. So what are you afraid of when you think of a challenge? Why are you afraid? In the CEO's case, she was afraid. It all kind of comes back to, usually we don't think we're good enough for the opportunity or the problem. We don't think we're not smart enough. We're not talented enough. We're not whatever enough. So what are you afraid of? Why are you afraid? And then the third question is the real kicker, which is I call the power question, because when we're in fear, we're not in our power, but when we stand for freedom, we are. And that third question is, so what would you do if you weren't afraid? How would you solve that challenge if you weren't afraid? The fourth question is, how would you feel without that fear? And the last question is very important, which is, why is it okay to let the fear go? So as a leader, if you're an entrepreneur just getting started and you're going, oh my gosh, we're dealing with inflation and supply chain issues and, dollar versus the, pound sterling, whatever. Okay, just wait, stop. What would you do if you weren't afraid? How would you move forward if you weren't afraid? And that's where we start. And then you start to get, the energy back, the momentum back, and you see how you need to take action.
Well, there we go. That's a lovely, neat plan in relation to that 5-question exercise to help leaders think about that mindset you spoke about. And I'll also put them into the show notes as well. And because we're the Leadership Enigma, obviously I'm really keen to talk to you as well about the human-centered element of leadership, or the freedom-centered element, but I use the word human as well because I know there's a lot of humanity in the work that you do. And 3 pillars, and I want you to talk about these because they're power, love, and Ubuntu. Yeah. And I have some experience of Ubuntu, which we'll come back to later. That will keep you guessing. Ooh. But tell me a little bit about, from a thematic point of view, what is freedom-centered leadership?
Yeah, it's very simply, it's leading yourself and others with freedom rather than fear. And most of the time leaders lead from a place of fear and control.
Why do we do that? Why do we do that? I know, but is it because we just gather negative experiences and suck them up and then reflect them back? I don't know. What's going on?
We're not self-aware. We're not self-aware and we have ego. right now, obviously the world is dealing with so many business challenges. And I was talking with, again, a lot of our clients that we coach.
Yeah.
And even though many of them are running, very consciously running freedom center companies during hard times, the first reaction is clamp down, right? Don't share information. It looks scary. It's that kind of feeling. And I was working with the CEO of $100 million company we work with, and had to coach him down from the ledge. And I'm like, look, you have to lead right now during this hard time where you are open, you're sharing information in a responsible way, you're engaging people, you're asking for their input. And he's like, I know that's right. I'm just scared. Well, what are you afraid of? So I think that's it, Adam, is we just have to develop the skills, the mindset, and the tools to really lead from that place of freedom, because we make better decisions. We make wiser decisions. We're less reactionary. We spend our money better when we're coming from that place.
So I need us now to talk about those three elements, because we talked just briefly about power, love, and Ubuntu. Right. Help us. How have you landed on those three?
Great question. When I was doing this work, I thought, what am I going to say about leadership that hasn't already been said, or is somewhat different? And I really, really, really labored over this. I mean, I'm doing this for 25 years. And what I realized is what distinguishes, I believe, freedom-centered leadership from maybe servant leadership or authoritarian leadership, whatever, is these three things. Number one, it is about knowing how to be in your power in the right way. So it is not a sort of kumbaya or pushover approach to leadership.
Right.
It is being in your power. It's activating that power within. And by doing that, you're coming from a place of self-government or self-management and helping others also be able to self-govern or self-manage. You don't want people who are order takers. You want people who are able to, again, have that ability to access that power within. Love, I think that power and love go very strongly together. We don't always talk that much about it in the workplace. I love seeing your sign, love, behind you.
I know. Look,
right?
That wasn't deliberate either. So that's interesting, right?
Awesome. So there's lots to say about love, but the way that we kind of approach it is, and I talk about it in the book, is a relationship to self-worth. Okay. So, and you and I talked about this a little bit pre-show, but this just blows their mind. And if I could just say a bit on this for a moment. So one of the biggest things I had to learn through the years is that for a leader to really embrace the idea of freedom-centered leadership, typically they have to be pretty secure in who they are.
Right.
So self-worth, to me, self-worth is different than self-confidence. Self-confidence is situational. I can be confident talking with you about freedom at work, not confident flying a jet plane because I don't know how, right? So confidence.
I was going to ask as well, right?
I know, one of my many hidden talents. So, but confidence is situational. Worth has to come from within. One of my favorite questions when I'm speaking is I say to the audience, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how would you rate your level of self-worth and why?
Right.
And almost everyone gives themselves, less than an 8. And we have found sort of the high self-worth zone is at 8 or higher. And why our self-worth has to come from within. So when we're secure in who we are, we as leaders want to create an environment where everyone can blossom. But if you're not secure in who you are, and we've all experienced this with different colleagues and bosses, it's you're around people who want to pull other people down. And that's all that low self-worth behavior.
And that's linked to power as well, isn't it? In some ways,
Absolutely.
over-rotating, overusing power to, in some ways, downcast others and make myself feel better. Am I making the link, or is
you absolutely brilliantly are.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. And I love it because they're all interrelated. And so, right, when you are not in your power within, you're going to try to get power by taking it from others, right? It's that manipulative manipulation we sometimes see in our workplaces, or pulling the rug out from someone else, or taking the credit. All of those behaviors are low self-worth behaviors.
Right.
So anyone listening right now, if you're sitting there, evaluate your own self-worth, but also if you've got someone in the workplace it's not working out for you, it could be because they have low self-worth, issues, and they're really struggling with that. And we can talk more about it, Adam, too, if we want to. And then the third characteristic of a freedom-centered leader is Ubuntu.
Right.
And
I'm just going to pause there because people are thinking, I don't know that word, but tell us about that word.
Yes, absolutely. So I first learned it way back in 2004 when I went to South Africa and I was introduced to the concept. I got to go meet a wonderful lady named Wendy Lucas Bull. She ran the largest bank, retail arm of the bank in South Africa.
Right.
And she told me about this huge, massive transformation they did in a post-apartheid era. And I said, how'd you do it? And she goes, Traci, one word, Ubuntu. I'm like, what the heck is that word? And she goes, Ubuntu means I can only be at my best if you're at your best. And you can only be at your best if I'm at my best because we are one. And so to me, it's about that teamwork. It's about mutual reciprocity and accountability. And it's about being at our best, which requires self-knowledge. So it's really
Right.
about this oneness of humanity and how am I my best so everyone else can be at their best.
Now, that's a really powerful concept. And you might now be thinking, how comes I had some experience of the word Ubuntu?
Yes. Tell
Well,
us.
it was fascinating because I was going through your work. It reminded me of what I'd put into my book because I had been to Rwanda and I'd spent some time there in the villages with a client in relation to how epilepsy might be treated. But I also had an incredibly powerful visit to the Genocide Museum. Because as we know, in 1994, almost 1 million people were murdered in about 100 days. And the country has recovered and the communities that were at war are now living together. And if my memory serves me well, Ubuntu is very much part of the Genocide Museum and the impact it has and the message it now gives. So that really resonated with me. And I'm so glad that we were able to bring that out. And so tell us a little bit about maybe the interplay. We talked a little bit about this between power, love, and Ubuntu as regards a freedom-centered leader.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. That must have been super powerful to
It was.
experience that in Rwanda. And I'm so glad to know about that because I didn't know. So the interplay of all of this is, again, it's when we are in our worth, when we know our worth, that comes from, which is love, that comes also and is supported by our self-knowledge. When we're in self-worth, we are better at expressing our best, that's the Ubuntu, to help everybody else be at their best. Again, if you're not in your worth, you don't really care about helping other people be at their best, And then that's what also puts us in our power as leaders. So again, it's sort of a good triple threat in a way. When you have that self-knowledge, when you know every single person, as I believe, is a 10 in self-worth, that's what allows you to activate that power within. And then you engage in much more healthier behaviors like setting healthy boundaries, being more emotionally stable, bringing a sense of joy, wanting to see everyone rise. And that's how all of these things so importantly work together, Adam.
Let's be honest now, Traci, this is incredibly important to life, not just freedom at work, but let's think about the family unit as well. I've got 2 teenage kids. This is important in every aspect, isn't it?
It really is. And when people go through our courses, so often the number one feedback we hear is, oh my gosh, I thought I was just going to do this for work. This has totally changed my relationship at home and in my life. Yeah, absolutely. Super important. And what I have found a lot of times is when I talk with parents, going through our courses about their self-worth, we talk about, what about your kids' self-worth? Are you as a parent doing something that's building up their sense of self-worth, that they know they're a 10? Or are you doing things that's actually bringing down your child's sense of self-worth? And what kind of impact will that make on them through life? So yeah, it has a big impact.
So let's talk about that. That was a lovely segue, actually. So people will think we've done this already. We've rehearsed this. But when you talk about impact, there's a very real impact. Now, I know you've got, I think you said the 17th conference coming up in relation to your recognition or certification of companies.
Yeah.
Some of these are big companies now. Let's. I don't know whether you could name names, but we're talking big companies, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, we've certified over, the years, is going to be our 17th annual list. So WD-40, DaVita, Zappos, Groupon, Hulu, Pandora, HCL Technologies, got a lot of great ones in the UK that we worked with through the years that are smaller, but really great companies.
Right.
So
there's a lot of big companies here who are taking this seriously, but we've also heard how relevant it is to sole traders, solo entrepreneurs, etc. So tell me a little bit about the impact these companies are seeing, because I think you've got some fact and figures for me, haven't you, to kind of give weight behind the proposition.
Absolutely. We wanted to know, hey, is leading your company on democratic and freedom-centered principles, and then structuring your systems and processes this way, is this just kumbaya? Like, is this just some utopian thing, or does it actually impact the bottom line? And I have so many anecdotal stories, many of which I tell in my book, but we had a third-party analysis done, and they found that companies that practice the freedom at work model that we teach have on average 700% greater revenue growth over a 3-year period compared to S&P 500 index companies. So there is a massive impact to revenue and to the bottom line. And we also found during the last Great Recession in 2008, when we had data, because we're just entering this one, that companies that are more democratic and freedom-centered are much more resilient during times of stress and strain. And so obviously, if your company stays in business, which 95% of WorldBlu certified companies did, which was much higher than the average exit rate or failure rate in the US during the Great Recession, obviously that's going to impact jobs, it's going to impact performance, it's going to impact the bottom line. So there's a lot of individual stories I could tell to you, Adam, but the big picture is freedom equals money, success, impact.
Well, I wonder if the old adage, if you look after your people, take care of the people, they'll take care of the business. And maybe that's an example of it. Listen, Traci, a more personal question to you. The world's gone mad. The world's a little bit scary right now, whether it's social injustice or it's the war in Ukraine, or whether we're coming out of a pandemic and things happen around us. How do you not derail? How do you not lose your drive and your passion to serve and still strive towards helping 1 billion people? Because you're human too. So how do you deal with that kind of, I don't know, that frustration or falling off the wagon? That sounds as if
just life, right?
Life. Exactly that.
Totally,
Life.
Totally. No, thanks for the question. So I think it's very interesting when you do this work, because you're every day, my team and I were interacting and helping other people work through fear. And so I believe at the core of all these problems, like you just mentioned, whether it's social justice or our companies acting like dictatorships or whatever, the wars, to me, everything comes back to fear. So I do have to make sure I'm living my Ubuntu. You know, how can I make sure I'm at my best every day? And for me, what I found is I pretty much do the power question practice that I talked about, those 5 questions.
Okay.
I'm handling fear. I pretty much use that almost every day on myself, because I'm growing a business. I'm running a business too. So I'm constantly handling fear in myself. And often I journal about that. I'm a super spiritual person, like I mentioned. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I take time to pray and meditate. And I do that before I do anything else. I keep that time. It's, you know, usually the first thing you want to do is grab your phone, right? And start texting or emailing. Nope. I really do set aside time early in the morning. I get up to really pray and get centered and meditate and make sure that I am that I'm centered and that I've handled my own fear so I can help others.
Okay.
I love to walk my brand new puppy. I love to be outside in nature. I definitely like yoga, working out, going in. I live by the ocean. I live here in Florida in West Palm Beach, and going to the ocean. And I know I only moved here in November. I've lived all over the country, and let me tell you, this is it. It's heaven. Everyone come visit. And the other thing, Adam, is, never underestimate the power of dark chocolate with sea salt. So
that's almost my favorite. I think that is fabulous. So we certainly have that in common. Listen, as I hear you, give that answer, actually you understand the value of you. And a lot of people don't understand their own self-worth. Yeah. And that was really interesting what you said about the difference between the confidence and the worth. Yeah. So have you grown to understand and really appreciate your own self-worth?
Yeah, well, I've always had high self-worth, and I did not realize or understand this. I didn't figure this out till probably 10 years ago. Right. And the self-worth thing, because I've always felt very secure in who I am. And so you kind of just think everyone else thinks like you think. And kind of had several things that happened all at once, but had this life-changing moment in my mid-30s. I was on a walk with one of my best friends. We've been friends since we were kids, 14 years old, and met at summer camp.
Right.
And we're just walking along. So best friend, know each other a very long time. And she's never said this to me before. She looks at me and she goes, "Traci, you don't have those voices in your head like the rest of us do." And I'm like, "What voices?" And she's like, the voices that are constantly telling you you're stupid, you're ugly, you're not good enough, you're a failure, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what?
The inner critic.
The inner critic. And I'm like, what? I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, you talk to yourself that way, And she's like, yeah, most people do. And I was like, whoa. Cause I don't, I don't. And so that was sort of my awakening into all of this. And it actually had to learn too in business that our clients who really weren't doing a good job getting freedom at work and how to implement it were really struggling with self-worth. So I was really grateful when I was, woke up to how critical of an issue this is for people. And over the last 10 years, it's been really rewarding and fulfilling for me to help people identify where their self-worth is and then give them some practical skills to really increase it. Because I just think it's so important, Adam. I feel like we have this epidemic of self-worth. I mean, you never see a high self-worth dictator. You know what I mean? I mean, so many of these problems in the world, I believe, come from people not loving who they are and trying to get that love and significance externally in constructive or deconstructive ways.
So you have realized that you are one of those few people, Traci, who don't have that problem, right?
Yeah, I have. It took me a while to figure that out, but I'm grateful that I do know it so I can help others.
You got to take the wins where you find them. And that sounds like a pretty significant win to me.
I have other things I'm still working on, but okay, that one I came in with getting it.
Now, listen, there's been loads of nuggets that we've got out of this episode already, and I know that we've slightly scratched the surface. How do people connect with you? So if they want to carry on the conversation, bring you into their conversation, get you in to help with what they're doing, help them understand how they could be part of this movement, Freedom at Work, what's the best way, Traci?
Yeah, well, first of all, if I can do a plug, my new book, Freedom at Work, I promise you it's such...
Is that it behind you?
Oh my gosh, how did it end up there?
How did that happen?
How is that? I mean, talk about product placement. But
honestly,
hey, I'm really proud of it. 25 years of work, distributed by Penguin Random House. It's a legit, real book. It's full of stories, 100 best practices. So check out the book. And you can reach me at WorldBlu, BLU, worldblu.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm not super good on social. I've started an Instagram channel, Traci Fenton with an I, Traci. Just recently, because I'm just working. I'm not on social. I'm getting it done, right?
Okay.
But you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can reach us through WorldBlu. We have over 150 mindset, leadership, and organizational design courses, and we're now accepting applications for companies to apply to be WorldBlu certified. If you have 10 employees or more, you can apply to be a WorldBlu certified Freedom Center.
There you go. Anyone listening now, 10 or more employees, you can do just that. I actually sent you a LinkedIn request, actually, which you haven't responded to yet, Traci. So,
sorry.
Just saying, right? I have feelings and everything.
Oh my gosh. I will go look for that. I'm not even that good on LinkedIn. I mean, really. Dear. Oh my gosh, Adam.
We're having fun, aren't we? Listen, I've got another question for you. And all the things that you've done, seen, experienced, heard, etc., people know I ask this question. What's the single most important piece of leadership advice that you've given or received, or the thing that really stands out for you?
I feel like it's so much of what we've talked about. I think it's just, you got to live your purpose in life, live it from a place of freedom, not fear, and know your worth and know that you are a 10. Every single one of us. I tell a story in the book of seeing a bus go by one day when I was living in DC, and the bus had a huge ad. It was all white, and it was a Citibank ad. And in the ad, it said in giant black letters, "You were born pre-approved. You were born pre-approved." And I think
like that.
For leaders to know that and to come from that place, I'm telling you, everyone's going to want to work with you. People will listen to what you have to say and will rise. And so know your worth, live your purpose, and live with freedom, not fear. Bat those gremlins of fear away, because they're worthless. They're worthless, but you are full of worth.
Pre-approved. I love that. That's a great piece of advice, isn't it?
Pre-approved. Yep, exactly.
Listen, Traci, you've been a superstar. Thank you so much for coming on to the Leadership Enigma. I hope this has been fun for you too.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful. You are such a good interviewer. Thank you so much, Adam.
Oh, thank you. Take great care now.
Join us again next week for more tips and strategies on the Leadership Enigma. We'd love to hear your comments on today's show, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests. Get in touch with your host on LinkedIn or visit the dedicated website, www.leadersenigma.com, powered by Transform Performance International, where you can access our exclusive learning, including books, videos, bonus content, assessments, and more. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.